Over the years, I have worked almost all kinds of jobs, but some were weirder than others as I got to experience the things one can never forget. The job that I was particularly good at was the security guard. At first, I worked as a guard for an apartment building, but after doing my job perfectly for about a year, I was transferred to public housing. Job transfers are always a hassle to deal with, and as it was so sudden and unrelatable, I could not understand why they did that. Guess they needed a guard desperately for this place. But as I got there, I noticed that I was not the only guard there. And the strangest thing about this was that all the 3 guards were newly transferred here just like me. As I started working there, I could tell that there was something weird and very wrong about this place. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. But I wasn't the type to meddle in the things that were none of my business, nor did I care about anything else other than focusing on my work, which was important. One thing that I learned by working for all these years is that no matter how strange or weird the atmosphere of a workplace looks, you should simply just ignore it if you want to work for a long time. Finding another job with good pay is always a headache, and someone like me could not afford to be jobless even for a week. It was the 3rd day of our work, and I was doing my job just fine when one of the new guards who was supposed to stand at gate number 7 came running to me. He looked like he had just seen a ghost or something. His face had a freaked out expression on his face and sweat drops were forming on his forehead. "What happened, Charlie? Why do you look so scared?" Even though I didn't want to, I asked anyway, looking at how he rushed at me. I thought maybe someone was giving him a hard time. "Huh? No, it's nothing," he said with a distracted mind as he kept looking in the direction from where he just came. "What are you doing here then? Shouldn't you supposed to be on your post?" I asked. But he didn't respond and continued to stare in the direction. I waved my hand in front of his, breaking his focus. He looked at me, nodded, and went back to where he came from. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't like to meddle in other people's affairs, so I simply just shrugged my shoulder and focused on my job. The next day, when we were all guards having dinner, he was acting perfectly fine, not all jumpy as the day before. So I casually mentioned it in front of others while asking why he behaved the way he did. The moment I said that, I could notice him flinching, and without anyone who could say anything, he said that I must be mistaken. I was offensive that he was lying and calling me one. But I noticed the nervousness on his face, so I let it slide, saying, "Guess I am then." All of us quietly finished our food and went back to our post. Even though I didn't behave that way, I was offended by him lying to my face when I clearly remembered what happened that day. That was why I stopped having group lunch or dinner with other guards and just started eating on my own. He noticed me avoiding him, but he preferred not to say anything and stayed ignorant. It was one day when I reached half an hour early. I decided to take a stroll in the area, and as I was slowly walking, I passed by the gate where Charlie used to guard and noticed that he wasn't there yet. I was still bitter about what happened the other day, so I continued walking when I had the urge to use the restroom. There used to be public restrooms near each gate that we guards used, so I went to the one nearest to the gate, and as I was finished and about to go home, I heard whispering coming from the back of it. Thinking that coming out at this time might not be a good idea, I stayed inside. The whispering was so clear that I could understand every word of what the person was saying. Whoever the person was, he was threatening someone, and I don't know why, but I decided to take a peek at whatever was going on out there. A man who was wearing an expensive outfit. Now, it's not just clothes, but the rings on his fingers and shoes and goggles that he was wearing. Everything seemed to be of some very expensive brands. He was grabbing Charlie by the throat, and he had shown a bulge of newly withdrawn dollar bills in his mouth. Charlie's eyes were full of tears, and it looked like he was suffocating. "You better fill your belly with all the money I'm giving you, and keep your mouth shut about the corpse and the scene you witnessed, or else making another guard disappear is not a big deal for me," the man said in an ominous, terrifying whispering voice while gritting his teeth. Looking at his eyes, I could tell that he was a monster, and even if someone had to find it hard, they won't be able to find even an ounce of humanity in his eyes. And that was more terrifying than anything else, since he won't hesitate to do what he just said. Even though I wasn't the one getting threatened, my entire body started to tremble. Shaking like a leaf, I went inside the bathroom again and waited for them to leave. After about 20 minutes, Charlie walked in while stumbling and falling. As he entered, it was like his leg gave up and he fell to the floor. He started wailing like a little child, thinking that no one else was there, and so I decided to stay inside the toilet stall. For about half an hour, he continued to pour his heart out, and I couldn't help but feel sad for him as he seemed to be in a situation where there was no escape for him. I didn't want to entangle with it, so I just stayed still while restraining the urge to console him. When he was done, he washed his face and went on his way. After he was gone, I got out and walked to my post slowly with weak legs, hoping to not face Charlie. I had realized that not meddling in such affairs was just me being a coward, since there was nothing I wanted to do except save my own neck. And that realization hit hard.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I've been following the news for the past few days about a murder, and judging by what they were broadcasting today, made it seem they had a new lead on it. But despite that, I believe it was going to be more than a few days for them to find the culprit. My name is Anthony Brisk. I'm in my late 40s. When I say late, I mean 49. I've been the kind of person who has been abused all his childhood by the surrounding adults. From just a little scolding to the kind of brutal beatings that leave you on the verge of death, but doesn't let you die as you wish, I had endured all of that. So growing up, my goal was to remove the pain and suffering within the people, especially children. I feel like I'm again in those traumatizing days whenever I watch those poor innocent children struggling with their lives on the line, and I try to do whatever I can to separate the pain from them. It was just the other day when I was walking past the amusement park, I saw two little boys who were wearing dirty and torn up clothes getting scolded by a man. I clenched my fist as I saw him slapping them after getting angry over something. I was about to run there and kick the man in his guts, but my hands started to tremble and my legs froze on their own. Guess my body still hadn't forgotten the reaction of getting abused. The two boys were holding a bunch of balloons, and by the looks of it, they were here to sell it. Before taking any kind of action, I wanted to observe those kids a little more, so I started stalking them. Well, without any intention to harm them, of course. I saw them working till the park closed and then walking back home with whatever they had earned throughout the day. Once they reached home, I saw the same man who seemed quite drunk snatch the money from those poor kids and then beating them up to earn so little. He didn't even serve them dinner and closed the house door, leaving them to sleep in the garage. As I saw them consoling each other and crying to sleep with an empty belly, I decided what I was going to do about this. I was going to remove them from this hell and the misery they had been living till now with any means necessary. The next morning, I woke up earlier than my normal schedule and headed to the amusement park where I knew those kids would be selling the balloons. I was right to get up early because when I got there, I found them in their usual spot. After staring at them for a few minutes, wondering how many days it might have been since they had last eaten anything, the first thing I decided to do was feed them a decent breakfast. I approached them with the excuse of asking about the balloon's price, and when they hesitantly did, I couldn't understand their reactions. So I looked around me only to find people giving them a weird look while whispering something about them. I got it. The reason they couldn't sell their balloons despite being in an amusement park is the people. People only care about outer appearances, so of course they would have been thinking of these children as filthy beings, which was the reason I hated this world. Nice people didn't belong here. How about I buy all the balloons, kid? As I turned toward them asking this, their faces lit up as if I had solved all their problems. Really? They asked with their eyes full of hope and sparked them at me. Yes, but on one condition." Their faces dropped as I said that. The kids might have traumatized experiences to thinking I was trying to do something to them. Nothing weird, I promise. I just want to feed you guys breakfast and have fun in this amusement park like all the other kids. You know you won't have to do anything after selling me all the balloons besides going home, so why not accept my offer? The notice I mentioned home was because I could feel hesitation on their faces, and this way they would not deny looking at how scared they were of that man who I assumed was their father. I could tell by their shifting reactions that they wanted to believe me and run like the children they were, but the fear of their father beating them up again was also there. Once they accepted my offer, I took them to the food stalls and fed them until they told me they were full. Then I started talking to them on rides one by one, which was quite fun for all three of us. But as I was about to leave them, my heart started to clench with the thoughts of them getting the same thrashing treatment as earlier. "Hey kids, you guys want to watch the circus on the other end of the amusement park?" I asked. "But isn't that the one people keep calling lame, so there isn't one around there?" They asked with their innocent eyes. "Trust me kids, it's going to be fun. Now follow me." They followed my lead as we reached the tent of the circus. I looked around and there was no one around, so I sneaked them from the back side since I knew there wasn't going to be anyone there as well. As they were walking slowly to the front, I took the handkerchiefs I'd prepared for which laced with chloroform and put them on their noses. Right after they passed out, I dragged them to an area where no one would be able to see. I had already done all the thinking and preparing, so I took out the knife from my bag and stabbed them in their stomachs. Trust me, I cannot explain the amount of pain I was enduring as I did that, but according to my judgment, it was necessary to rid them of the pain and suffering they had been enduring. After all, it was my lifetime dedication to separate the misery from such children. This world isn't the kind of place that would treat them well. As I was thinking all this and stabbing them aggressively, my tears didn't stop themselves from falling auspiciously. Once I was sure they were dead, I put them in the caskets that were put there for the show. Well, it was so their bodies get discovered and then the proper burial they needed. I had spent all my money on them today, so I wasn't left with much. But for some reason, my heart was feeling light. The feelings of achieving a part of your goal was good. I needed to earn some money before I could save other children, so I started hunting for a job. And the day I found one in a flower store, I heard the news of the bodies being discovered. Wasn't that a good thing? But was that about them blaming me for taking innocent lives? Ever since then, I started following up on the news to see how much these good-for-nothing people have progressed. And as I'm still working at a flower shop as an assistant salesman, I could tell by looking at the news that it's not much. They have no idea about the intention of the killer, so it's been difficult for them to find me. Well, they can call me whatever they want. Either it's a monster or a psychotic murderer. I'm just trying to save the unfortunate children. Around the time when I was in my early 20s, I was a regular in a bar downtown and friended one of the guards, Freddie. During the closing time of the bar, when we used to be few to no people, I used to have normal chit-chats with him since he was the kind of guy who could lighten your mood just by talking to you. My man Freddie had a huge build like Shaq, but despite being the guard of a bar, he had a tender personality like an innocent child who hadn't yet seen the world. But that doesn't mean that he couldn't act tough when he needed to. He was one of the most intimidating guys, just by looking at him, all because of his size and the way his voice sounded. It was the other night. I came out of the bar and found him talking to someone. Since Freddie's back was on my side, I could not see who the other person was. There was no chairs for the guard outside the bar, so I sat in one of them and started waiting for him to finish his conversation so that I could indulge in our routine chat with him. About 15 minutes or so, it looked like he was done with whomever he was talking to as he walked back to his usual refreshing smile. "Who is it to put you in such a good mood, Fred?" I asked in a teasing manner, hinting to ask if it was a woman. "It was just an old lady, but she seems to be a good humor despite suffering from dementia," he said as he grabbed another chair, placing it in front of him to sit. "Did you just meet her? How do you know she has dementia?" I asked, honestly confused. No, she walks past this bar every day asking for the way, but she never seems to remember me, so I figured the old lady has it, he said, making himself comfortable and giving me his complete attention. Now that you say it like that, it does make sense. By the way, what happened with that lady with a beautiful and kind smile? Did you see her again? I remembered the woman he was talking about the other day, and the way he was telling me all that it seemed like someone was crushing hard over here. No, I didn't see her after that. I hope she's fine, he said, looking at his hands with a worried expression on his face. Nah, don't worry, she must be thrilling. You scared those guys good. I'm sure they'd be wetting their pants just by thinking of that day, I said, giving his left arm a light, playful punch, and he started laughing in response. It was about 3 days ago when I came out to the bar after hearing a commotion, only to find Freddie, who was over 6'9", hanging over two boys around 5'11" or less, with each his hand like a sack of rice. Those guys looked frightened to their pants as they cried for mercy. Fred said something in a whispering manner before releasing them. Looking at their pale expression, I figured it might be a threat or something. I didn't see any girl around, but he told me they were harassing some girl, and the way that girl smiled while saying thanks left him memorized by her. After chatting for about half an hour with them about this and that, I left for home. As I mentioned earlier, talking with Freddie could put anyone's mind at ease, and the same thing happened to me, because by the time I was going back home, I had forgotten about the argument I had with my mom before rushing out. When I got back, I found her asleep on the living room couch, so I carried her into her room before heading to sleep in mine. For the next few days, the old lady with dementia was included in our conversation. Freddie looked impressed by her sense of humor, to the point where it became a regular mention at that point. Until tonight. I was walking to the bar when I saw him a little further to the bar where he usually mentioned conversating with the old lady. Thinking he must be waiting for her, I opened my mouth to call out his name, but my words stuck in my throat as I saw his hand moving, and him talking as if he was interacting with someone. Then all of a sudden, he burst out in laughter, holding his belly as if he just heard the joke of the century. I was getting terrified at this point because there was clearly no one around him, and he sure as hell wasn't on a phone call. Still, I hesitantly walked over to him and asked who he was talking to. Hey man, this is the old lady I was telling you about. Ma'am, this is my friend Tristan. He's a nice kid. The way he was introducing me to no one was bone-chilling, as I was getting even more scared. I can't see her, man, I said in a hesitant voice, and he looked at me with a confused expression. Then he looked in the direction he mentioned the old lady in a manner that seemed like he was paying attention to someone. Ah, is that it? That's rude, Tristan. I understand she's small, but you shouldn't joke about someone's height like that, he said, nudging me on the shoulder. No, this is not... I'm gonna drop this nice old lady at her home, okay? Don't wait for me to go home. He cut me off in the middle and started walking to his car. Wait, Freddie, listen to me. I followed him, trying to get him to listen, but the way he was walking so fast seemed like he was possessed or something. I had to almost run after him to try and catch up. I kept calling him to tell him there was no one with him, but he didn't let me and went inside the car. He drove straight into the pole with a speed in front of my very own eyes, causing his car to crash into it. I ran straight to him and somehow managed to get him out as he seemed unconscious and wounded. After that, I immediately called 911 and asked for an ambulance. It got there within the next 15 minutes and Freddie was taken to the emergency room to get instant treatment. Doctors told me that nothing seemed severe except for the hit he had gotten on his head caused him to go into the state of a coma. They can't say when he'll be able to wake up, and I'm still debating with myself if I should mention the old lady to him or not. I understand that if he told me that she was real, so she must be, just not in the form of a living being. And if Freddie could see ghosts, then I'm starting to question the existence of that girl he had a crush on.
This happened 24 years ago in July of 1996. I had finished my term of service for the Army. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and decided at midnight I would out-process and travel back to Wisconsin. All day I was so anxious to go that I had trouble sleeping. Finally, at 23:45, I got out of bed and went to sign out with the desk sergeant. Of course, knowing people wanted to sign out at midnight, he decided to do his rounds. You can't leave until you get your final sign-off with the sergeant and turn in your room key. So I waited, and finally, at 02:45, he returned. I turned my key in, got the sign-off, and at 03:30, I was on my way. At first, I was so full of adrenaline that I felt that I could drive for days. Unfortunately, that adrenaline didn't last long, and by the time I was getting through Dallas, I was nodding off. I decided just past Denton that I would pull over at the next rest stop and take a quick nap until the sun came up. I could barely keep my eyes open when I came up to a stop. I pulled over and got out of my car to get some air and throw something away and to get a look at my surroundings. There were only about 3 other cars and 2 semi-trucks there. It was a picnic stop and not a rest stop, so no restrooms. I threw my trash away and glanced at a poster of a few missing persons, but I really didn't pay any attention to it. I went back to my car, which was a basic Geo Metro. No radio, no power windows, no power locks. I cracked the windows and turned on the boombox I had for some tunes and laid down to get some sleep. I was only asleep maybe 5 or 10 minutes when I felt my car shake just slightly. I cracked an eye open and looked and didn't see anything, so I blew it off and went back to sleep. I then heard what sounded like my door handle being pulled and scratched on the door key. I then sat up quickly, but I didn't see anyone there. I looked at all the windows and didn't see anyone, so again I shrugged it off as me being tired and laid back down and turned up the radio. Being a Texas night in July, it was hot, but I was so tired I just laid back down. A few more minutes later, I heard the door handle again and car really shook. I sat up quickly and saw a man standing at the passenger's side looking in. Even though it was hot and humid, he was wearing a red sweatshirt with the hood up and I couldn't see his face. Being young and dumb and just out of the military, I yelled at him asking what the F do you want? He just stared at me like an idiot and I got out of the car. Mind you, I'm only 5'6", but I was livid. He just walked off towards the picnic tables like nothing happened. All the while, I'm yelling at him that if he came back, I'd take him out. I decided I would just drive on from there. I got back in and went on my way. Even though I was so upset, only about 10 miles down the road, I was super tired again. Luckily, about another 10 miles down I-35, there was another picnic stop. Not sure why North Texas doesn't have rest areas, but they don't. I pulled into the second picnic stop and backed into a spot just in case I needed to leave quickly. Not sure why, but there was only one other car there and no semi-trucks. I again locked the doors, cracked the windows, and turned on my boombox. I fell asleep right away, and about 30 minutes later I hear a loud thud on my driver's side window. I jumped up and looked around, and no one was there. I got out of the car, which was very stupid, but I had my macho military attitude going, but no one was around. I assumed it was my nerves from the other stop. I got back into my car, locked the doors again, and closed my eyes. This time I was too amped up to fall asleep, so I laid there with my eyes closed. I felt that someone was looking at me, and I opened my eyes and saw the guy standing there again with the red sweatshirt, hood up. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could see he was smiling at me. I popped up quick and tried to quickly open the door and bump him. Being a cheap Geo, since the doors were locked, it didn't open. He walked backwards, still staring at me. By the time I got out, he was about 30 feet away, facing me. It was fairly dark, but as I looked him over, he looked really skinny but was about 6'2", maybe 6'3", but I still felt like I could take him with my military experience. He was wearing the red hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and green tennis shoes. For some reason, I thought the shoes looked odd. I could see something shine every now and then as he stood there staring at me, and I honestly believe it was a machete. I quickly reached into my back seat and grabbed my baseball bat and started yelling at him to come get some. I'm not really sure why I said that. He started walking towards me and I took a few steps towards him, not really thinking. As I got about 5 feet away from my car and he was now about 15 feet from me, a yellow van pulled up quick and parked just off to the side of the road. I finally realized what was happening and I saw 2 guys also wearing hooded sweatshirts in the van. Before they could get out, I ran back to my car. I had left the keys in the ignition. Since I had backed in, I was able to cut it hard right and peeled my car out of there. I was so lucky. Being a manual car, I didn't stall the car because the other 2 guys were out of the van and the first guy was just about at my car. I jumped back on the interstate and didn't stop until I was about 20 miles into Oklahoma. I stopped for gas and to use the restroom. In the restroom, I noticed that same flyer I barely glanced at the first picnic stop. It was basically a flyer with several missing persons on it and warning people not to stop for long periods of time at the rest areas. It described a possible suspect as possibly 6 foot, wearing blue jeans, green shoes, and a red hooded sweatshirt. I completely went white. Needless to say, since it was daylight, I drove the rest of the way to Wisconsin wide awake. Not sure why, but I never reported it to the number on the flyer or told anyone about it. But now I live in North Texas and pass those 2 picnic stops every day on my way to work, and I think about it quite often.